My mom and sisters called my dad a deadbeat and a monster. Years later, they bled me dry of my savings. I contacted my dad, and he revealed why he disappeared years ago. The truth was shocking. So here's the deal. I, 29 male, and I'm about to tell you a story that's been eating at me for years. It's about my family, my dad, who supposedly abandoned us when I was 12, and the slow burn realization that everything I was told growing up was complete bullshit. Growing up, it was just me, my mom Linda, and my two older sisters Emma, now 33, and Sarah, now 31. Dad had abandoned us when I was in 7th grade. At least that's what I was told every single day for the next 17 years. According to my mom and sisters, he was a deadbeat, a monster, a controlling piece of garbage who couldn't handle strong, independent women, and bailed when things got tough. The stories were always the same. Dad was supposedly this toxic male who tried to control everything they did. He didn't want them working. He didn't want them having opinions. He was threatened by their intelligence and independence. Classic patriarchal oppression, you know? Mom would go on these rants about how men like him just couldn't handle women who knew their worth. Your father was the worst kind of man, Mom would say, usually while we were eating dinner around our little kitchen table. He thought he could tell us how to live, how to think, how to spend money. Thank God we got rid of him before he could poison you with his toxic masculinity, Jake. Emma and Sarah would nod along like little disciples. They were both in high school when Dad left, so they remembered more than I did. They'd chime in with stories about how Dad would get angry when Mom wanted to take night classes, or how he'd complain when they bought new clothes, or how he'd try to mansplain things to them. He was so threatened by successful women, Sarah would add, tossing her hair like she was making some profound statement. He couldn't stand that Mom was smarter than him, that we were all smarter than him. Men like that can't handle being challenged, Emma would jump in. They think women should just shut up and be grateful. Dad couldn't accept that we had our own thoughts and opinions. As a kid, I believed every word. Why wouldn't I? These were the 3 most important women in my life, and they all agreed on one thing. Dad was the villain in our story. They painted this picture of him as this controlling, angry man who couldn't handle being around strong females, so he just left. Packed his bags one day and never looked back. But here's the thing that always bothered me. Even as a kid, I had memories of Dad that didn't match their stories. I remembered him teaching me to ride a bike in our driveway, being patient when I kept falling over. I remembered him helping me with homework at the kitchen table, never getting frustrated when I didn't understand something. I remembered him making pancakes on Saturday mornings, and how he'd let me crack the eggs even though I always made a mess. I remembered him reading me bedtime stories, doing different voices for all the characters. I remembered him taking me to the park and pushing me on the swings until my legs got tired. I remembered him bandaging my scraped knees and telling me that crying was okay, that even tough guys cry sometimes. Whenever I'd bring up these memories, Mom and my sisters would shut me down fast. You were just a child, Jake. You don't remember correctly. Or, he was performing for you because you were his precious son. You didn't see how he really treated us women. He only acted nice when people were watching, Emma would add. Behind closed doors, he was completely different. That's how abusers operate, Sarah would chime in, like she was some kind of expert. They put on a show in public, but privately they're monsters. They had an answer for everything. Dad was nice to me because I was male. Dad left because he couldn't control them. Dad never called or visited because he was a coward who couldn't face what he'd done. Every question I had, every doubt, they'd twist it back to the same narrative. Dad bad, us good, men terrible, women victims. Growing up in that house was like being raised in some kind of feminist boot camp. Don't get me wrong. I believe in equality. I believe women deserve respect and opportunities. But my mom and sisters took it to this weird extreme where literally everything that went wrong in our lives was because of the patriarchy or toxic masculinity or some man somewhere oppressing them. Emma couldn't get the promotion she wanted? Must be sexism? Couldn't possibly be because she showed up late half the time and spent most of her shifts complaining about her male coworkers. Sarah's boyfriend broke up with her? Obviously, he was threatened by her independence, not because she was controlling and demanding and had a habit of screaming at him in public. Mom couldn't hold down a job for more than 6 months? Definitely because male bosses couldn't handle her speaking truth to power, not because she had a habit of arguing with everyone and creating drama wherever she went. Every conversation in our house somehow circled back to how men were the root of all problems. The neighbor's dog barking too much? Probably because the male owner was too selfish to train it properly. Car broke down? Obviously the male mechanic was trying to rip us off. Pizza delivery guy was late? Clearly, he didn't respect women enough to be punctual. I learned early on to just nod and agree. Anytime I questioned their logic or pointed out inconsistencies, I'd get the same lecture about how I was thinking like a man and needed to check my privilege and do better. It was exhausting. The worst part was how they'd use Dad as the ultimate example of male failure. Anytime I did something they didn't like, forgot to put the toilet seat down, left dishes in the sink, disagreed with them about anything, I'd get the same response. You're acting just like your father. It was like a threat, a warning that I was one step away from becoming the monster who had abandoned them. The financial stuff started when I turned 16 and got my first job bussing tables at a local restaurant. Mom sat me down for what she called a family responsibility talk. Jake, honey, now that you're earning money, we need to discuss your contribution to this household, she said, with Emma and Sarah flanked on either side of her like bodyguards. Your father left us with nothing. We've been struggling for years to keep this family afloat. It's time for you to step up and help support the women who raised you. This is what real men do, Emma added, crossing her arms. They take care of the women in their lives. Unlike your father, who only cared about himself. You have a chance to prove you're different, Sarah jumped in, to show that you're not going to abandon us like he did. At first, it seemed reasonable. I was living at home, eating their food, using their utilities. Contributing made sense. So I started giving them $200 a month from my part-time restaurant job. It felt good, actually, like I was helping my family the way Dad never did. See how good it feels to support women? Mom would say when I handed over my paycheck. This is what healthy masculinity looks like, Jake. You're being the man your father never was. But then it increased. Mom needed help with car payments. Emma needed money for college textbooks. Sarah needed gas money to look for jobs. Every month they needed more. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was handing over basically my entire paycheck to them and keeping maybe $50 for myself. This is what family does, Mom would say whenever I hesitated. We support each other. Your father never understood that. He was selfish, only cared about himself. You're better than him, Jake. You're going to be a man who actually takes care of women. Think about all the sacrifices we've made for you, Emma would add. All the nights Mom worked double shifts to keep food on the table. All the times Sarah gave up things she wanted so you could have school supplies. We've given you everything, Sarah would pile on. Now it's your turn to give back. Unless you want to be just another deadbeat like your father. The guilt trips were relentless and effective. Every time I thought about keeping more of my paycheck, I'd remember their words. I'd picture Dad as this selfish monster who had abandoned his family, and I'd convince myself that giving them money was proof that I was better than him. When I graduated high school, I'd managed to save up about $3,000 for community college by working double shifts and hiding cash tips. But Emma was struggling with her rent and needed help. So my college fund went to her, along with a lecture about how education was a privilege and family came first. College will always be there, Mom assured me. But family is forever. Your father put his own wants ahead of his family's needs, and look how that turned out. You're showing real maturity by prioritizing what matters. Then Sarah got laid off from her retail job and needed money for job interviews. Then Mom's car broke down and needed $800 in repairs. Then Emma's laptop died, and she needed a new one for her online classes. There was always something, always an emergency, that required my immediate financial intervention. I kept working, kept giving them money, kept putting my own plans on hold. Because that's what good men do, right? They provide. They support. They don't abandon women like my father did. By the time I was 22, I was working full-time at the warehouse and had picked up a weekend landscaping job. I was making decent money for someone with just a high school diploma, but I was living like a broke college student. Same tiny bedroom I'd had since middle school. Same clothes I'd bought years ago. Same beat-up car with over 200,000 miles that I'd inherited from Sarah when she upgraded. Meanwhile, Mom had gotten her nails done every 2 weeks. Emma had moved into a nicer apartment with granite countertops, and Sarah had bought herself a brand new car with heated seats and a sunroof. But I didn't complain, because they kept reminding me that this was temporary, that once they got back on their feet, things would change. Emma was going to finish her degree and get a great job. Sarah was going to start her own business. Mom was going to find a career that appreciated her talents, and then they wouldn't need my help anymore. You're investing in our future, Mom would say. When Emma gets her degree, when Sarah's business takes off, when I find the right opportunity, we'll all be better off. That's how families work. We lift each other up. Except none of that ever happened. Emma changed majors 3 times, from business to psychology to art therapy, and took 8 years to get a degree that led to exactly 0 job opportunities. Every semester brought a new crisis that required my financial intervention. Textbooks, lab fees, parking permits, student activity fees. When she finally graduated, she couldn't find work in her field and blamed it on systemic sexism in the mental health industry. Sarah's business was selling essential oils and motivational quotes on Facebook. She'd post these inspirational memes about female entrepreneurs while asking me for money to attend business conferences that were really just weekend spa retreats. When her sales never materialized, she blamed it on people not understanding her vision and not having enough startup capital. Mom bounced from job to job, always finding fault with her male supervisors and quitting in dramatic fashion. She'd come home with stories about harassment, discrimination, being passed over for promotions because she was too threatening to insecure men. Every few months, she'd storm out of another workplace and spend weeks on my dime while she looked for the next opportunity. But somehow it was still my responsibility to keep everyone afloat. Because I was the man. Because Dad had abandoned them. Because all men are potential deadbeats, and I needed to prove I was different. The breaking point came last year, when I was 28. I'd been saving money secretly for months, keeping cash in an envelope hidden behind my dresser, because I finally wanted to move out and get my own place. Nothing fancy, just a studio apartment where I could have some privacy and maybe start dating without my mom and sisters scrutinizing every woman I brought home. I'd saved up almost $8,000 for a security deposit and first few months' rent. I was so close to freedom I could taste it. I'd already looked at apartments, filled out applications, imagined what it would be like to come home to my own space where nobody could guilt me about my choices. Then, Emma had her emergency. She burst into my room one Tuesday night around 10 p.m., crying hysterically, with Mom and Sarah right behind her. Apparently, Emma had been dating some guy named Marcus for 6 months, and she'd just found out he was married. Not only that, but she'd lent him $5,000 to invest in cryptocurrency, and surprise, surprise, the money was gone. "Jake, I need your help," Emma sobbed, collapsing onto my bed like her legs couldn't support her. "I'm going to be evicted. I can't pay rent. I trusted a man and he screwed me over, just like Dad screwed us over. Please, you're the only good man in my life." "This is exactly what we've been talking about, Jake," Sarah jumped in immediately. "This is why we need to stick together as a family. Men like Marcus, men like Dad, they prey on women. They take advantage of our trusting nature and leave us with nothing." Mom nodded solemnly, her hand on Emma's shoulder. "Your sister needs you. This is your chance to prove you're nothing like your father, that you won't abandon the women in your life when things get difficult. I'll pay you back," Emma promised through her tears. "As soon as I get back on my feet, I'll pay back every penny. I just need help right now. Please, Jake, you're my brother. You're supposed to protect me." They wanted $6,000, almost everything I'd saved. I said no. For the first time in my life, I looked at the 3 women who'd raised me and said, "No, I can't. I need that money." The reaction was immediate and explosive. "Are you serious?" Emma screamed, jumping up from my bed. "I'm about to be homeless and you're worried about your little savings account? What are you even saving for that's more important than family?" Sarah's eyes narrowed dangerously. "This is so typical. We knew this would happen eventually. We knew you'd turn out just like him. All men are the same. Selfish when it matters most." Mom's voice went cold and disappointed, the tone that had made me feel guilty since childhood. "Jacob, I raised you better than this. I thought we taught you to respect women, to support women. But I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. After everything we've done for you," Emma continued, her voice getting higher and more frantic. "All the sacrifices we've made, all the love we've shown you, and this is how you repay us? By abandoning me when I need you most. Do you know what it's like to be a woman in this world?" Sarah demanded. "Do you have any idea how hard it is for us? We can't just coast through life on male privilege like you can. We need support. We need protection. Your father said the same things," Mom added quietly, but loud enough for me to hear. "When I needed him most, when we all needed him, he was worried about money too, worried about himself. I thought you were different." They tag-teamed me for 2 hours, crying, yelling, guilting, manipulating. They brought up every time they'd sacrificed for me, every meal they'd cooked, every shirt they'd washed, every time they'd put my needs first. They reminded me that Dad had abandoned them, that men were naturally selfish, that I was their only hope for protection against a world that hated women. "This is your test, Jake," Mom said, her voice shaking with what I thought was emotion, but now realized was pure manipulation. "This is the moment that defines whether you're a good man or just another deadbeat like your father. Are you going to be the man who steps up when women need him, or are you going to be the man who turns his back when it's inconvenient? Emma could end up on the streets, Sarah added. Is your savings account more important than your sister's safety? What kind of man lets his sister become homeless? I'm not asking for charity, Emma jumped in. I'm asking for family support. I'm asking you to be my brother, to show me that not all men are monsters who abandon women when they're vulnerable. And like an idiot, I caved. I gave Emma $6,000 of my savings. She promised she'd pay me back as soon as she got back on her feet. She hugged me and called me her hero. Mom cried and said she was proud of me. Sarah said I'd proven I was nothing like Dad. This is what real men do, Mom said as I handed over the cash. They protect and provide. They don't think only of themselves. You've shown real character tonight, Jake. Emma was evicted 3 months later anyway. Turns out she'd been lying about her rent situation, and most of the money went to shopping sprees and spa days and dinners out with her girlfriends. When I confronted her about it, she accused me of financially controlling her and said I was being just like a typical man, keeping track of every penny. I shouldn't have to justify how I spend money, she said, when I asked where it had gone. That's what abusive men do. They monitor women's spending and make them account for everything. I thought you were better than that. The money was supposed to be for rent, I pointed out. It was for my survival, she shot back. And sometimes survival means maintaining your mental health. Those spa days weren't luxuries. They were necessary for my well-being after what Marcus put me through. That's when something inside me finally snapped. I started paying attention to their stories. Really paying attention. I started noticing the contradictions, the inconsistencies, the way they'd twist situations to make themselves the victims. I started wondering if maybe, just maybe, their version of Dad wasn't the whole truth. Every story they told had the same pattern. They were innocent victims. Men were evil oppressors. And any problems in their lives were the result of male selfishness or sexism. It didn't matter what the actual circumstances were. Somehow, it always came back to men being terrible. When Sarah got fired from her call center job, it was because her male supervisor was threatened by her confidence. When Emma got a bad grade in college, it was because her male professor was biased against women. When Mom got into a fender bender, it was because the male driver was probably texting and not paying attention. They never took responsibility for anything. It was always someone else's fault, usually a man's fault, and definitely never their own fault. So I did something I'd never done before. I started looking for him. It took me 3 months of digging through old documents, social media, public records. Mom had always said he'd disappeared completely, that he'd probably changed his name and moved across the country to avoid paying child support. But I found him living 2 states over, running a small construction company, married to a woman named Patricia with 2 teenage kids. His name was still David Mitchell. He hadn't been hiding at all. I stared at his Facebook profile for hours. He looked older, obviously, but he seemed happy. His profile was full of pictures with his wife and stepkids at baseball games, family barbecues, vacation trips to national parks. He looked like a regular dad, nothing like the monster my family had described. In every photo, he was smiling genuinely, his arm around his new family, looking relaxed and content. His stepkids seemed comfortable with him, not the behavior you'd expect around an abusive, controlling man. Patricia looked happy too, laughing in candid shots, leaning into him during formal pictures. It took me 2 more weeks to work up the courage to call him. When he answered the phone and I said, "Dad, it's Jake." There was this long silence. Then I heard him take a shaky breath. "Jesus Christ, Jake? Is that really you?" His voice was exactly like I remembered. Warm, familiar, safe. Not the cold, angry voice I'd been trained to expect. "Yeah, it's me. I wanted to talk to you. About what happened. About why you left." Another long pause. Then, "Son, I've been waiting 17 years for this phone call." We talked for 3 hours that first day, and the story he told me was nothing. Nothing. Like what I'd grown up believing. According to Dad, he didn't abandon us. He was forced out. "Your mother filed a restraining order against me," he explained, his voice heavy with old pain. "She claimed I was abusive, threatening, dangerous. It was completely fabricated, Jake. I never laid a hand on any of you. Never even raised my voice. But she had Emma and Sarah backing up her story, saying they were afraid of me, that I'd been controlling and violent. I felt sick. But why would they do that? Because I found out about the money. This is where the story gets really twisted. Apparently, for the last 2 years of their marriage, Mom had been systematically stealing money from their joint accounts and hiding it in a separate account under her maiden name. She'd also been using credit cards in Dad's name to fund her spending sprees and girls' trips with her sisters. By the time Dad discovered what was happening, she'd racked up over $40,000 in debt and hidden almost $15,000 in cash. I confronted her about it, Dad said. I didn't even threaten divorce or anything dramatic. I just said we needed to figure out how to deal with the debt and that she needed to stop taking money without discussing it with me first. That's it. I suggested we go to counseling, maybe get help with budgeting. But Mom had panicked. She knew Dad would eventually figure out the full extent of what she'd done, so she went nuclear. First, she convinced Emma and Sarah that Dad was planning to divorce her and leave them with nothing. She told them he was going to kick them out, cut off their college funds, make them fend for themselves. She painted him as this selfish monster who was abandoning his family over a little bit of money. She told them I was planning to take everything, Dad continued. The house, the cars, even their college savings. She said I was going to leave them homeless and penniless, that I'd never really loved any of them. And then she went to a lawyer and filed for a restraining order, claiming Dad had been emotionally and financially abusive, that he'd threatened her, that she feared for her safety and the safety of her children. The system is designed to protect women, Jake, which is how it should be, Dad explained. But that also means when a woman lies, people believe her. I was out of the house within 48 hours. Couldn't come within 500 feet of you kids. Couldn't call, couldn't visit, couldn't even send letters. The restraining order lasted 6 months, but by then, the damage was done. Mom had filed for divorce, painted Dad as an abuser in court, and turned Emma and Sarah completely against him. When the restraining order expired, he tried to contact us, but we'd moved and changed our phone numbers. I hired a private investigator to find you, Dad said, but your mother had coached you kids to say you were afraid of me, that you didn't want to see me. The court decided it was in your best interest to have no contact with me until you were adults and could decide for yourselves. But Dad, you could have contacted me when I turned 18, when I turned 21. Why didn't you try? His voice broke a little. I did try, son. I sent letters to every address I could find for you. I tried calling when I found phone numbers, but they all went unanswered or came back as undeliverable. I figured you hated me too. I figured it was better to let you live your life in peace than to keep trying to force my way back in. We both cried during that conversation. 17 years of lies, 17 years of believing my father was a monster when he'd been the victim all along. But it got worse. Over the next few weeks, Dad filled in more details. The financial abuse hadn't been a one-time thing. After he left, Mom had used his social security number to open new credit cards and take out loans. She'd destroyed his credit, left him owing money for debts he'd never authorized. It took him years to clean up the mess legally and financially. That's part of why I never fought harder for custody, he admitted. I was working 3 jobs just to pay off the debt she'd created in my name. I couldn't afford lawyers, couldn't afford court battles. I was just trying to survive. Dad explained how he'd lived in a studio apartment for 3 years, eating ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, driving a car with 300,000 miles because most of his income went to paying off Mom's credit card debt and the court-ordered child support. Meanwhile, Mom had been collecting child support from him for years. Money I'd never seen a penny of. According to Dad, he'd been paying over $1,000 a month in court-ordered support until I turned 18. When I asked Mom about this years later, she claimed the money had gone to household expenses, and raising Jake isn't cheap. But the most damning detail was this. Dad had been trying to contact me through official channels for years. When I turned 18, he'd filed a petition with the court to have his contact information given to me, so I could decide as an adult whether I wanted a relationship with him. Legally, Mom was supposed to pass along his information. She never did. I've had the same phone number for 10 years, Jake, Dad told me. Same email address. I kept hoping that someday you'd reach out. I even joined Facebook just in case you tried to find me there. The more we talked, the more the pieces fell into place. Dad wasn't the controlling monster I'd been told about. He was a man who discovered his wife was stealing from him, tried to address it responsibly, and got destroyed by a legal system that believed her lies without question. Meanwhile, Mom and my sisters had spent 17 years rewriting history, turning Dad into the villain to justify their own behavior. They'd used his absence as proof that all men were inherently selfish and unreliable, while simultaneously living off the child support he'd been faithfully paying. I spent the next month in this weird fugue state, trying to process everything I'd learned. 17 years of my life had been built on lies. The father I'd been taught to hate was actually the parent who'd been trying to protect and provide for us. The women I'd been supporting and sacrificing for were the ones who'd been manipulative and abusive all along. But the hardest part was realizing how they'd used me. All those years of demanding money, of making me feel guilty for having my own needs and wants, of telling me I needed to step up because Dad abandoned us. It was all manipulation. They didn't need my help to survive. They wanted my money because taking it was easier than earning their own. Emma had never intended to pay me back. Sarah had never actually been looking for work during those months I supported her job search. Mom had been perfectly capable of holding down a job. She just preferred living off my income while playing the victim. They'd raised me to be their personal ATM, and they'd used my love and respect for them as the PIN. When I finally confronted them with what I'd learned, their reactions told me everything I needed to know. I sat them down in our living room on a Saturday morning and said, "I talked to Dad." The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. "Jake, honey, whatever he told you," Mom started, but I cut her off. "He told me about the restraining order, about the money you stole, about the child support you've been collecting and hiding, about the letters and phone calls you never told me about." Emma's face went white. Sarah crossed her arms defensively. Mom's eyes narrowed into slits. "I can't believe you'd betray us like this," Mom said coldly. "After everything we've done for you, everything we've sacrificed, you're going to believe his lies over the women who raised you." "What lies?" I asked. "Be specific. What did he lie about?" They couldn't answer. Instead, they went on the attack. Sarah launched into this rant about how I was choosing the patriarchy over the women who loved me. Emma accused me of being brainwashed by male manipulation tactics. Mom said I was just like him, and that she'd always feared this day would come. "Men always stick together," Mom spat. "You've proven that you're no different from your father. Selfish, ungrateful, willing to abandon women the moment it's convenient. This is exactly what toxic masculinity looks like," Sarah added. "You've been poisoned by male propaganda. You're choosing to believe a man who abandoned his family over the women who sacrificed everything to raise you." "I should have known this would happen," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "I should have known you'd turn on us eventually. That's what men do. They use women until they don't need them anymore. Then they throw them away. But here's the thing. Their manipulation tactics didn't work anymore. Now that I knew what they were doing, I could see every guilt trip, every emotional manipulation, every attempt to make me the villain for asking questions. "I'm done," I said simply. "I'm done giving you money. I'm done making your problems my responsibility. I'm done being your backup plan for every poor decision you make." The meltdown was immediate and spectacular. Emma started crying and screaming about how I was leaving her homeless. Sarah accused me of financial abuse and said I was punishing them for being women. Mom went full victim mode, talking about how she'd sacrificed her whole life for her ungrateful son and how I was destroying the family. "This is what men do," Mom screamed. "They take and take and take, and the moment women need something in return, they disappear. You're exactly like your father. We gave you everything," Emma sobbed. "We loved you. We supported you. We made you the center of our world, and this is how you repay us? By choosing him over us? You're betraying every woman who ever believed in you," Sarah added. "You're proving that men can't be trusted, that you'll always choose other men over the women who need you." But I'd heard it all before. I'd been hearing it my whole life, and now I recognized it for what it was. Manipulation, pure and simple. They tried every trick in their playbook. Tears, accusations, guilt trips, threats to cut contact, reminders of all their sacrifices. When none of that worked, they started attacking my character, calling me selfish, ungrateful, just like my father. "Fine," Mom said finally, her voice ice cold. "Go running back to Daddy. But don't come crawling to us when he abandons you too. Don't expect us to be here when you realize what kind of man he really is." "You've made your choice," Sarah added. "You've chosen the patriarchy over your own family. I hope you're happy with yourself." "I'll never forgive you for this," Emma whispered. "Never. You've broken my heart, Jake. You've proven that men really are all the same." I moved out 2 weeks later. Dad helped me find an apartment across town. He didn't make a big deal about it, didn't try to make up for lost time all at once, didn't demand gratitude or explanations. He just showed up with his truck when I needed help moving, brought me a housewarming gift, a tool set because he remembered I'd always liked building things, and gave me his phone number in case I needed anything. "I don't expect us to just pick up where we left off," he told me as we carried boxes up to my new place. 17 years is a long time. I just want you to know that I'm here if you want me to be. It's been 6 months since I moved out, and the difference in my life is incredible. I have money in my savings account. Real money. Not just the few dollars left over after supporting 3 grown women. I can buy groceries without calculating how much I need to give to my family. I've started dating again, something that was impossible when I lived at home, And every woman I brought around got interrogated about her intentions and whether she was taking advantage of my generous nature. Dad and I have dinner once a week now. Nothing fancy, just pizza and beer while we watch baseball games. We're getting to know each other as adults, sharing stories, figuring out who we are to each other now. He's nothing like the monster my family described. He's just a regular guy who got screwed over by someone he loved and spent 17 years paying the price for it. His wife Patricia is lovely, a kindergarten teacher who makes the world's best chocolate chip cookies and treats me like one of her own kids. They're twins, my step-siblings I never knew I had, are good kids who play soccer and argue about video games and do all the normal teenage stuff I never got to do because I was too busy working to support my family. As for Mom, Emma, and Sarah, they've been calling and texting constantly since I moved out. At first, it was anger and accusations. Then it switched to guilt trips and sob stories about how much they missed me. Now it's panic, because apparently, without my financial support, their whole house of cards is collapsing. Emma got evicted from her apartment and had to move back in with Mom. Sarah's car got repossessed because she'd been using my money to make the payments, instead of actually finding work. Mom is 3 months behind on the mortgage, and blaming it on me for abandoning the family in their time of need. Every message I get from them follows the same pattern. It's all my fault. I'm selfish. I'm just like Dad. I've been brainwashed. Real men support women. I'm destroying the family. I'll regret this someday. They sacrificed everything for me. I owe them. But you know what? I don't owe them shit.